Sri Krishnaya Paramatmane Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavat Gita, Chapter 2, Saankhya Yoga. Sanjaya said, Sri Krishna then addressed the following words to Arjuna, who was, as mentioned before, overwhelmed with pity, whose eyes were filled with tears and agitated, and who was full of sorrow. Sri Bhagavan said, Arjuna, how has this infatuation overtaken you at this odd hour? It is shunned by noble souls. Neither will it bring heaven nor fame to you. Yield not to unmanliness, Arjuna. This does not befit you. Shaking off this base faint-heartedness, stand up, O scorcher of enemies. Arjuna said, how, Krishna, shall I fight Bhishma and Drona with arrows on battlefield? They are worthy of deepest reverence, O destroyer of fools. It is better to live on alms in this world without slaying these noble elders, because even after killing them, we shall after all enjoy only blood-stained pleasures in the form of wealth and sense enjoyments. We do not even know which is preferable for us, to fight or not to fight, nor do we know whether we shall win or whether they will conquer us. Those very sons of Dhritarashtra, killing whom we do not even wish to live, stand in the enemy ranks. With my very being smitten by the vice of faint-heartedness and my mind puzzled with regard to duty, I beseech you, tell me that which is decidedly good. I am your disciple. Pray, instruct me who have taken refuge in you. For even on obtaining undisputed sovereignty and an affluent kingdom on this earth and lordship over the gods, I do not see any means that can drive away the grief which is drying up my senses. Sanjaya said, O king, having thus spoken to Sri Krishna, Arjuna again said to him, I will not fight, and became silent. Then, O Dhritarashtra, Sri Krishna, as if smiling, addressed the following words to grieving Arjuna in the midst of the two armies. Sri Bhagavan said, Arjuna, you grieve over those who should not be grieved for, and yet speak like the learned. Wise men do not sorrow over the dead or the living. In fact, there was never a time when I was not, or when you or these kings were not. Nor is it a fact that hereafter we shall all cease to be. Just as boyhood, youth, and old age are attributed to the soul through the body, even so it attains another body. The wise man does not get deluded about this. O son of Kunti, the contact between the senses and their objects, which give rise to the feelings of heat and cold, pleasure and pain, etc., are transitory and fleeting. Therefore, Arjuna, ignore them. Arjuna, the wise man to whom pain and pleasure are alike, and who is not tormented by these contacts, becomes eligible for immortality. The unreal has no existence, and the real never ceases to be. The reality of both has thus been perceived by the seers of the truth. Know that alone to be imperishable, which pervades this universe, for no one has the power to destroy this indestructible substance. All these bodies pertaining to the imperishable, indefinable, and eternal soul are spoken of as perishable. Therefore, Arjuna, fight. Both of them are ignorant. He who considers the soul to be capable of killing, and he who takes it as killed. For verily the soul neither kills nor is killed. The soul is never born nor dies, nor does it become only after being born. For it is unborn, eternal, everlasting, and primeval. Even though the body is slain, the soul is not. Arjuna, the man who knows this soul to be imperishable, eternal, and free from birth and decay, how and whom will he cause to be killed? How and whom will he kill? As a man shedding worn-out garments takes other new ones, likewise the embodied soul, casting off worn-out bodies, enters into others which are new. Weapons cannot cut it, nor can fire burn it. Water cannot wet it, nor can wind dry it. For the soul is incapable of being cut. It is proof against fire, impervious to water, and undryable as well. The soul is eternal, omnipresent, immovable, constant, and everlasting. This soul is unmanifest. It is incomprehensible, and it is spoken of as immutable. Therefore, knowing it as such, you should not grieve. And Arjuna, if you should suppose this soul to be subject to constant birth and death, even then you should not grieve like this. For in that case, death is certain for the born, and rebirth is inevitable for the dead. You should not therefore grieve over the inevitable. Arjuna, before birth, beings are not manifest to our human senses. At death, they return to the unmanifest again. They are manifest only in the interim between birth and death. What occasion then for lamentation? Hardly anyone perceives the soul as marvelous. Scarce another likewise speaks thereof as marvelous, and scarce another hears of it as marvelous. While there are some who know it not even on hearing of it. Arjuna, the soul dwelling in the bodies of all can never be slain. Therefore, you should not mourn for anyone. Besides, considering your own duty too, you should not waver, for there is nothing more welcome for a man of the warrior class than a righteous war. Arjuna, happy are the Kshatriyas who get such an unsolicited opportunity for war, which is an open gateway to the heaven. Now, if you refuse to fight this righteous war, then shirking your duty and losing your reputation, you will incur sin. Nay, people will also pour undying infamy on you. And infamy brought on a man enjoying popular esteem is worse than death. And the warrior chiefs who thought highly of you will now despise you, thinking that it was fear which drove you from the battle. And your enemies, disparaging your might, will speak many unbecoming words. What can be more distressing than this? Die and you will win heaven. Conquer and you will enjoy sovereignty of the earth. Therefore stand up, Arjuna, determined to fight. Treating alike victory and defeat, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, get ready for the fight. Then, fighting thus, you will not incur sin. Arjuna, this attitude of mind has been presented to you from the point of view of Jnana Yoga. Now here the same as presented from the standpoint of Karma Yoga, the yoga of selfless action. Equipped with this attitude of mind, you will be able to throw off completely the shackles of karma. In this path of disinterested action, there is no loss of effort, nor is there fear of contrary results. Even a little practice of this discipline saves one from the terrible fear of birth and death. Arjuna, in this yoga of disinterested action, the intellect is determinate and directed singly towards one ideal, whereas the intellect of the undecided or ignorant man moved by desires wanders in all directions after innumerable aims. Arjuna, those who are full of worldly desires and devoted to the letter of the Vedas, who look upon heaven as the supreme goal and argue that there is nothing beyond heaven, are unwise. They utter flowery speech recommending many rituals of various kinds of the attainment of pleasure and power with the rebirth as their fruit. Those whose minds are carried away by such words and who are deeply attached to pleasure and worldly power cannot attain the determinate intellect concentrated on God. Arjuna, the Vedas thus deal with the evolutes of the three gunas, namely worldly enjoyments and the means of attaining such enjoyments. Be thou indifferent to these enjoyments and their means, rising above pairs of opposites like pleasures and pains, etc., in the eternal existence, that is God, absolutely unconcerned about the fulfillment of wants and the preservation of what has been already attained and self-controlled. A Brahmana who has obtained enlightenment has the same use for all the Vedas as one who stands at the brink of a sheet of water overflowing on all sides as for a small reservoir of water. Your right is to work only and never to the fruit thereof. Be not instrumental in making your actions bear fruit, nor let your attachment be to inaction. Arjuna, perform your duties established in yoga, renouncing attachment, and be even-minded in success and failure. Evenness of mind is called yoga. Action with a selfish motive is far inferior to this yoga in the form of equanimity. Do seek refuge in this equipoise of mind. Arjuna, for poor and wretched are those who are instrumental in making their actions bear fruit. Endowed with equanimity, one sheds in this life both good and evil. Therefore, strive for the practice of this yoga of equanimity. Skill in action lies in the practice of this yoga. For wise men possessing an equipoised mind, renouncing the fruit of actions and freed from the shackles of birth and attain the blissful supreme state. When your mind will have fully crossed the mire of delusion, you will then grow indifferent to the enjoyments of this world and the next that have been heard of, as well as to those that are yet to be heard of. When your intellect, confused by hearing conflicting statements, will rest steady and undistracted in meditation on God, you will then attain yoga, everlasting union with God. Arjuna said, Krishna, what is the definition of a God-realized soul? Stable of mind and established in samadhi. How does the man of stable mind speak, and how does he sit? How does he walk? Sri Bhagavan said, Arjuna, when one thoroughly casts off all cravings of the mind and is satisfied in the self through the joy of the self, he is then called stable of mind, or sthita prajna. The sage, whose mind remains unperturbed amid sorrows, whose thirst for pleasures has altogether disappeared, and who is free from passion, fear, and anger, is called stable of mind. He who is unattached to everything and meeting with good and evil neither rejoices nor recoils, his mind is stable. When, like a tortoise that draws in its limbs from all directions, he withdraws all his senses from the sense objects, his mind becomes steady. Sense objects turn away from him, who does not enjoy them with his senses, but the taste for them persists. This relish also disappears in the case of the man of sthita prajna when he realizes the Supreme. Turbulent by nature, the senses, even of a wise man who is practicing self-control, forcibly carry away his mind, Arjuna. Therefore, having controlled all the senses and concentrating his mind, he should sit for meditation, devoting himself, heart and soul, to me. For he whose senses are mastered is known to be sthita prajna. The man dwelling on sense objects develops attachment for them. From attachment springs up desire, and from desire ensues anger. From anger arises infatuation. From infatuation, confusion of memory. From confusion of memory, loss of reason. And from loss of reason, one goes to complete ruin. But the self-controlled sadhaka, while enjoying the various sense objects through his senses, which are disciplined and free from likes and dislikes, attains placidity of mind. With the attainment of such placidity of mind, all his sorrows come to an end, and the intellect of such a person of tranquil mind, soon withdrawing itself from all sides, becomes firmly established in God. He who has not controlled his mind and senses can have no reason, nor can such an undisciplined man think of God. The unthinking man can have no peace. And how can there be happiness for one who lacks peace of mind? As the wind carries away a boat upon the waters, even so of the senses moving among sense objects. The one to which the mind is attached takes away his discrimination. Therefore, Arjuna, he whose senses or completely restrained from their objects is said to have a stable mind. That which is night to all beings, in that state of divine knowledge and supreme bliss, the God-realized yogi keeps awake, and that the ever-changing, transient worldly happiness in which all beings skip awake is night to the seer. As the waters of different rivers enter the ocean, which, though full on all sides, remains undisturbed, likewise he in whom all enjoyments merge themselves without causing disturbance attains peace. Not he who hankers after such enjoyments. He who has given up all the desires and moves free from attachment, egoism, and thirst for enjoyment attains peace. Arjuna, such is the state of the God-realized soul. Having reached this state, he overcomes delusion, and established in this state, even at the last moment, he attains Brahmic bliss. Thus, in the Upanishad sung by the Lord, the science of Brahma, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna ends the second chapter entitled Saankhya Yoga, the yoga of knowledge. Bhagavat Gita Mahathmiyam. The glories of chapter 2 of the Bhagavat Gita from the Padma Purana. Lord Vishnu said, "My dear Lakshmi, you have heard from me the glories of the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Now please listen carefully as I tell you the glories of the second chapter. Once in the south, in the town of Pandharpur, a very learned Brahmana by the name of Devashyama lived. He was able to perform all kinds of fire sacrifices. He also knew the importance of receiving guests, and by his activities he managed to satisfy all the demigods. But he was not happy and peaceful in his heart and mind. He had the desire to attain knowledge of the soul's relationship with the super soul, Paramatma, and towards this end, he would invite many yogis and tapasvis and render all kinds of service to them and inquire from them about the absolute truth. In this way, he passed many years of his life. One day, while he was walking, he saw one yogi in front of him, sitting cross-legged with his eyes fixed on the tip of his nose, totally absorbed in meditation. Devashyama could perceive that this yogi was completely peaceful and without any material desires. Devashyama, with the greatest respect and reverence, fell at the feet of that yogi and inquired from him how he could attain complete peace of mind. At that time, the yogi, who had complete knowledge of the Supreme Personality of God, Lord Krishna, advised Devashyama to go to the village of Shaupur and meet one Mitravan, who was a goat herder by profession, and take instructions in the science of God realization from him. After hearing this, Devashyama again and again offered his respectful obeisances at the feet of that yogi and immediately left for Shaupur. When he arrived there, he found on the northern side one beautiful forest where he was informed that Mitravan lived. When he entered that forest, he saw on the bank of a small river Mitravan seated on top of some rocks. Mitravan looked very beautiful and totally peaceful. In that forest, the wind was blowing very gently and a beautiful aroma was emanating from every direction. The goats were peacefully moving here and there, totally unafraid. Some were seen to be sitting next to tigers and others ferocious animals very peacefully. When Devashyama saw this scene, his mind became very peaceful and he respectfully approached Mitravan and sat close to him. Mitravan appeared to be fully absorbed in his meditation. After some time, Devashyama inquired from him how he would be able to attain devotion to Lord Krishna. When Mitravan heard this question, for a moment he was lost in deep thought. Then he replied, "My dear learned Devashyama, once long ago I was in the forest looking after the goats. When a very ferocious tiger attacked, the goats ran here and there to save themselves. I also ran off due to fear of the tiger. From some distance, I looked back and saw that the tiger on the bank of this river encountered one of my goats. At that time, a strange and wonderful thing happened. The tiger lost all his anger and desire to eat my goats. Thereupon, my goat inquired from the tiger, 'You have attained your food. So why are you not eating the meat of my body? You should immediately kill me and with great relish eat up my flesh. Why are you hesitating?' The tiger said, 'My dear goat, since I have come to this place, all anger has left me, and I have no hunger or thirst.' The goat said, 'I also do not know why I am feeling so fearless and peaceful. What can be the reason for this? If you know, then kindly inform me.' The tiger replied, 'I also do not know. Let us inquire from that person.' When I saw this change take place in the activities of the tiger and goat, I became very astonished. At that time, they both approached me and inquired as to the reason. I noticed that a monkey was sitting on the bench of a nearby tree. I went along with the two of them and inquired from that monkey king. That monkey replied to our question with great respect. 'Listen, I will tell you, it is a very old story. In that forest just in front of you, there is a very large temple in which Lord Brahma installed a Shivalinga. Long ago, a learned sage of the name Sukhama, who had performed many austerities, lived there. Daily he would bring flowers from the forest and water from the river and worship Lord Shiva. In this way, he was living there for many years when one day one sage arrived. At that time, Sukhama brought fruits and water and fed that sage. After the sage had eaten and rested, Sukhama spoke to him, 'O learned one, only for the reason of obtaining knowledge of the Supreme Lord am I living here performing austerities and worship, but the results of my austerities have been attained today by coming in contact with you. When the sage heard the words of Sukama, which were full of submission, he became greatly pleased, and he wrote on one piece of stone the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavat Gita. He then instructed Sukama to daily read those verses. By doing so, you will quickly attain your goal. After having spoken thus, that sage disappeared from that place while Sukama was looking on. After that, following the instructions of that sage, Sukama recited those verses daily for the rest of his life. Very quickly, he attained complete knowledge of Lord Krishna. And from the day he started reciting those verses, he felt no more thirst or hunger. And due to this austerities and devotion at this place, anyone who visits here does not feel the pangs of hunger and thirst and immediately attains complete peace. Mitravan said, "My dear Devashyama, after the monkey had finished telling us that wonderful story, I, along with the tiger and goat, went to the temple. We found there written on a piece of stone the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavat Gita, and I started to recite those verses daily. In this way, we were able to attain very quickly devotion to Lord Krishna. My dear Brahmana, if you also start reciting the verses of the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavat Gita, you will very quickly attain the mercy of Lord Krishna." Lord Vishnu said, "My dear Lakshmi, in this way Devashyama attained knowledge of Mitravan, and after worshipping that great soul, he returned to Pandharpur and daily recited that second chapter. And whoever visited Pandharpur, Devashyama would first recite before him the second chapter of the Srimad Bhagavat Gita. In this way, Devashyama attained the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. My dear Lakshmi, these are the glories of the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavat Gita." This completes the second chapter. Shri Krishna 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 Krishna